So The Last House on Cemetery Lane sounds a little bit like another movie, doesn't it? So this is a 2015 British horror film, and I use the word horror film here very loosely because this really isn't a horror film. It's more of a supernatural drama dressed up to sound like a horror film. Basically, the story is here we have a kind of quiet guy. He's basically a script writer, and he's kind of wants to sort of get away from it all, and so he hires this big sort of country cottage out in the middle of nowhere to try and get a bit of solitude so we can kind of write his next script for his horror film that he's writing over the next 8 weeks. He basically is told by the kind of the landlady that there's this kind of old woman who lives upstairs in the attic, basically, that he didn't kind of know about, but she won't be any bother. He'll just kind of be up there and keep herself to himself, but he has basically the rest of the house. He soon meets this kind of this age appropriate, of course, attractive young lady, and the romance starts, and then kind of strange things starts to happen, which leads him to believe there's some kind of criminal murder type activities has happened in this house, and paranormal stuff starts to happen. I won't really go into too much more detail on that because the plot here isn't particularly dense, so it will kind of go and tell you the whole load of the movie here. So it's a quiet movie. It's not in any means a kind of, there's no horror in this, basically. There's no scares, there's no gore, anything like that. Basically, it's just a supernatural tale, but the kind of the supernatural elements are so slight here, it really kind of barely registers as a kind of any type of horror film at all. There's very little, there's really no effects, to be quite honest. It's really just sort of doors slamming and the record player going on and things like that. So there's very little here in the way of stuff that you'd find creepy. No effects to speak of. And on the plus side, I think it's relatively well made. I think it's kind of well shot. All the camera lighting, everything like that looks pretty decent. So it's kind of, it feels like it has some reasonable sort of production behind it. In regards to that, there's two things I would say, however. The soundtrack on this film is awful, absolutely awful. It has this really distracting kind of piano score, basically, that is, when it starts playing, it really kind of takes you out. It's so overpowering, and really sort of, it's obviously trying to be this kind of spooky music, but unfortunately it really takes away from the film because it kind of is the film is quite quiet, and this piano score is they kind of dub it over quite loud. It doesn't go with it, unfortunately. There's also a kind of the obligatory indie sort of rock sort of song as well that kind of again just sounds like the filmmakers have kind of done a favour for his mate's local band and put one of their songs in, something along that. Anyway, so that's the kind of the music side of stuff. The other kind of thing I would say in regards to production is the actual acting. The main guy, I think, does an okay job here. I think he comes across as obviously a bit of a quiet guy, but I don't think I really have a problem with his acting. But some of the other characters, their line delivery is just off to me. They seem to have massive pauses between words, and it sounds like they're kind of thinking about what they should be saying and stuff like that. So I think the acting outside of the kind of the main character is a little bit on the poorer side. I also kind of wasn't buying the kind of this sort of romantic relationship that builds between these sort of the two main characters, really. But it just seems really quick and kind of out of nowhere. It just kind of happens, and we just have to accept it. The other thing I would say here, and this I don't really spoil it exactly, but I think the climax of this film is poor. It's such a slow film in build up, and then all of a sudden we kind of don't make it sound like it's an action set piece, because it isn't, but we're kind of given this more of like an exposition dump at the end of the film about what's kind of happened, and we kind of understand a little bit, and it just I guess the antagonist, who it turns out to be, is a little bit stupid, and when you watch what happens, it is a bit silly, and I can't say too much more than that, but it just ends up being a bit disappointing. And on top of that, the very end of the film, there's actually a kind of twist to it, and again, this is a crap twist because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense about what we've just seen. So again, it kind of takes points down for that. So this was a kind of This is kind of like your mum's like ghost story that she kind of likes to watch. There's nothing offensive in this film. There's no gore. There's no scares. Basically, it's kind of one of these sort of ghost stories that you'll see on TV over Christmas and things like that. So it's completely inoffensive, relatively well made in some aspects, but ultimately it's kind of completely forgettable at the same time. So I'm going to give this movie a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Leave a comment, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.